Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our Nancy Drew Games review series, where we are ranking every single Nancy Drew game on 6 key aspects, being the story and premise of each game, the suspects, the puzzles, the music, the atmosphere, and the ending. I'm your host, Jameson.
And I'm Julian. What's going on, everybody?
And today we are reviewing Nancy Drew, The Hauntings of Castle Malloy.
Nancy Drew, The Haunting of Castle Malloy is the 19th installment in the Her Interactive Nancy Drew video game series, and in my opinion, it's one of the more overshadowed games, and I'm not quite sure why that is, really.
Yeah, I think I could definitely say that this is one of the most overlooked games in the franchise, and that's not necessarily to say that it's underrated, it is what it is. This game, I feel like, is most comparable in the series to The Curse of Blackmore Manor, which we called one of the most Scooby-Doo Nancy Drew games in the franchise. This is a very atmospheric, spooky game. It feels like the location and the premise and the story could be pulled right out of a Scooby-Doo episode, and it really starts to show in the music, and the sets, and everything that we're going to get into as far as this game goes.
Okay, I think it's fair to jump right into the story and premise now. This one's got a bit of an interesting premise. It's Nancy Drew being invited to a wedding out in Dublin, Ireland. She's being the maid of honor, which is a great deal, but it's kind of weird circumstances. See, it's to a foreign exchange student that Nancy never even knew that well in the first place, she says.
She probably knew her decently. I mean, it's not like...
Why, I'm completely blanking on her name.
Her name's, I don't know. Kyler
Malloy.
Kyler Malloy.
The foreign exchange student being Kyler Malloy, and she's got a really interesting heritage and a background tie to where the wedding is going to be taking place at Castle Malloy. Castle Malloy it's dark. That's the first word that came to my head is dark. It's a really, really weird place to host a wedding. Literally, a side of the wall is missing because a bomb went off there.
Much more than a side of the wall. There's staircases that are incomplete. There's like all sorts of just... The one wing of the castle is completely gone.
So maybe she's hosting it here for an economic standpoint because it is her own castle. And still, props to her, this castle it's cool.
It is a castle.
But it's in shambles. It's like not the ideal wedding place, you know what I'm saying? Something that annoyed me straight off the bat in this game, while Nancy's reading the overview for the game, she says that she's never visited a castle before and that she's super excited to go to this castle. Like, did her interactor forget Case 4 existed, one of the best games of all time, Wickford Castle? Like, what the heck were they thinking there? I don't know, I just had to get that out of there. That just annoyed me.
It's important to note that Kyler Malloy didn't know that she had a castle, or that she had the family name Malloy in the first place, as she was raised in Britain under the name Mallory, the last name Mallory. And this is because her family had sort of a bad heritage that they kind of just like to sweep under the rug, where her, great-grandfather, I believe, or great-uncle. Great-uncle Brendan Malloy was a scientist in the 1940s who said to have been working with the Allied forces, but in secret he was actually passing on his findings to the Axis in the World War II. And so on that note, he would tinker around with his young daughter Fiona and his wife in this great big Castle Malloy that they had, until one day they had a horrible accident in the laboratory and the castle exploded, and they were all presumed dead. Brendan, there's hardly any bits of them left that they could find. The explosion was so big, and there's no understatement of that explosion. You see it everywhere you go in this game. There's just ruins and shambles everywhere. There's a tower that you can't even get up into because the staircase is gone, and there's all sorts of just crazy ruins and dilapidated wreckage that's all part of Brendan's folly. The trouble begins when Nancy gets out of the ditch on the side of the road and she meets Donald Delaney up at the castle, and he tells her that the wedding has been called off. Go on to the inn now, I say. On for ya. Just in his epic Irish dialect. So Nancy, doing what any teenage sleuth would do, starts pulling rocks and pebbles out of the ground and hucking them at the windows until she either knocks someone with a pebble enough times to get Kyle's attention or just breaks the old window.
Isn't that a possibility? You can break the window?
Yeah, if you use one of the bigger rocks, it only takes one rock to get her attention, but you can break the window. That's
what I thought.
Yeah. There aren't really any consequences to that, but Kyler doesn't care. It's like she just found out she has this house in the first place, and there's like a lot more of it missing than just a little window pane. But on that note, Nancy knocks on the door again. Donald's forced to take her in, and Nancy meets with Kyler, who begrudgingly informs her that her groom has gone missing a mere 48 hours before the wedding.
Now, Matt's known as a prankster, and Kyler is obsessed with the idea that this is all an elaborate prank. Matt's still on for the wedding and everything. It's just gonna be some great big joke when he's standing there on the aisle as she's walking up and all this stuff, but she's just stuck on that idea. But other characters, not so much. They think that Matt got cold feet and that he's run away, which is a much darker theory and would be a lot more depressing of a game.
Yeah, for sure. But the game finds an alternate path that's neither of these two predictions, and I think that it goes really well with the atmosphere and what the story had been planning and foreshadowing.
So I think we should dive into suspects now. We touched a little bit on Donald Delaney, the caretaker. Jamie, you want to talk about his character a little bit?
Yeah, Donald Delaney is a superstitious Irishman who has been a caretaker employed by the estate of the Malloys for pretty much his entire professional life, I guess. He just shears the sheep that are on the property and kind of lives by himself. He's the solitary type, and he kind of seems to like it. And when he's not working, he's down the road at the Crow's... what's the place called? The Screamin' Banshee Inn, that's what it's called. Drinking his manly, fruity drinks.
Yeah.
So, on that note, he makes an interesting character to talk to. He has an interesting dynamic with Kyler, where he likes Kyler because even though she has a British accent and everything, she is directly related to the Malloys, being the great niece of Brendan Malloy, and he thinks that it's only proper that an Irish woman is to inherit this land that he's cared for his entire life. However, though, he has an abiding distaste for the British, specifically Matt, who Kyler is to marry.
Donald says in the game that he'd rather be dead than to see the estate fall into the hands of a Brit, so he is extremely upset about this marriage, and it kind of throws a little motive that he could have something to do with Matt's disappearance.
And the thing is, if they just had it like that, then I think it would have just been an obvious red herring. But he's, like, very outspoken about the fact that, like, yeah, screw Matt. I hope no one ever finds him. The good people took him. It was the leprechauns, I tell you. He's gone. His luggage is gone. He's leaving the girl. And it's funny, because, like, him acting that blunt about how much he doesn't like the man who's disappeared gives, like, almost a Gray Courtright kind of effect, where it kind of just muddles whether or not you think that he is or isn't suspicious.
So Kyler, in my opinion, she has a beautiful design. I think her animations are the best we've seen from a single character at any point in this game. I made close attention when I was playing this game. Her lip syncing is perfect. All of her hand gestures and everything are perfect. I don't know how she memorizes 15-digit phone numbers, but she does, so she's perfect. I don't know. I just thought that right from the opening scene where she sees Nancy looming over the window in Castle Malloy when she's throwing rocks and everything, I mean, she just has great animations. It was the best I've seen out of a Nancy Drew suspect this far.
Honestly, yeah, Kyler is overall a really, really well-rounded character in both, like, physical form and in just the way that she talks and dialogue and everything. And come to think of it, it's kind of funny, now that I think about it, this game kind of just has two suspects, because...
No, I was gonna say is that, like, no sane person would rule her as a suspect.
Yeah, unless, you know, there's, like, some really dark plot twist that she, like, killed Matt or something, I don't know. But anyhow, basically, through the most of the game, the only two people you ever meet or talk to is just Donald Delaney, Kit Foley, who we'll get to in a second, and Kyler Malloy.
Now, I wasn't a fan of... Well, okay, the suspects... Okay, let me restart. The suspects in this game are all great, but I am never that huge a fan of Nancy Drew games where the culprit / whatever's going on is somebody you can't really talk to or interact with. I don't know, that's just my personal opinion, that's my take on Nancy Drew games. I just like interacting with the culprit of the game. But Kyler is great. It's true that she would absolutely have no motivation against Matt, she's just more concerned about him than anything. And she's got a great, brilliant tie to this Castle Malloy. I loved hearing about all of the backstories of her great uncle and all this stuff, and she, the majority of her life, had thought her last name was Mallory. And that was a really cool point, that she had just now discovered it was Malloy, and oh look, you inherited this grand castle. Like, that was pretty cool. She must feel like the luckiest woman in the world.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool, even if the castle does require a lot of upkeep. So anyways, the last suspect of the game is Kit Foley, and personally I think this is where the, I guess, assumed budgeting issues of this game start to show, because Kit Foley is supposed to be an Irishman, and they gave him a kind of a flimsy story that, oh, he's from the States originally and he never could get the accent to stick when he came to Ireland. So, he talks like an American, and he has an American voice, and he never so much as uses any European dialect or vocabulary. And I kind of feel like that was them just trying to, you know, save costs by just having some everyday average Joe voice a character instead of having to pay for a foreign accent.
Now, I know back in the day, Her Interactive churned out games like it was nothing, but I think it's worth noting there was only a 2.5-month difference between Phantom of Menace and this game.
Really?
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
That's insane. Oh
I know,
my God.
so obviously, I don't know if they were working on them both at the same time, but there definitely is a little bit of a rushed feel to the game. Not in Kyler's animations, that's great, but I mean,
Yeah.
other aspects of the game, other than characters, you can kind of just pick up on, like, a little bit of, like, rushed creation, I guess.
Man, that's weird to think about because I remember someone in the comments of the last review saying that this game felt like it was not rushed at all and that it was a...
No, I said that about Phantom of Menace.
Yeah, I know.
And
about
I'm sure
Phantom of Menace.
I'm sure Phantom of Menace wasn't rushed. I'm sure they put a lot of time into that
That's
one.
what I'm saying. You can probably see that maybe a lot of the effort went into Phantom of Menace as opposed to Castle Malloy. Maybe they planned it that way. Anyhow, Kit Foley is supposed to be, what, one of the groomsmen? He's not the best man.
No, he's not.
And Matt says that he did this because it was a political move and he made the best man one of his associates from work just so that it would look good for social networking and stuff, and Kit was cool with it. Kit has a black eye, and apparently he also had a thing for the bride before she was to be wed, and now Matt's gone missing, and that makes him very suspicious.
Yeah, I mean, if we were a police detective, I think we would book Matt right on the first night we met him.
Tino Balducci would have that guy in yeast stocks.
Yeah, Kit's an interesting character, though I loved every conversation with him. He's still a really enjoyable guy to talk to, and he does seem really concerned for Matt, but he thinks that Kyler is more or less just going insane. He is really convinced that Matt is just, he got cold feet, and he's jumping ship in the marriage, which is like a reasonable... It's kind of like in Kit's best intentions that happens, because he wants to rekindle the old bond he had with Kyler.
Or so it would seem, yeah. One of the most suspicious things about Kit is that he insists that Matt fled because his luggage is gone, and then a little more than halfway through the game, you find Matt's luggage under Kit's cot.
Mm-hmm.
So that is... Hey, you can judge what you want. You can see who's suspicious.
This might be the most suspicion thrown onto a character for him to not be the culprit.
Yeah, and speaking of culprits, one thing that I want to point out is that there hardly is a culprit in this game. Like,
I know, it's interesting, but it's still a good mystery.
I would say that it's a mystery for sure, yeah, but there is no crime in this game, I don't think. No one has any charges pressed against them at the end of the game, and we'll get into that when we get to that. But no, there is no real foul play. It's just a set of extraordinary circumstances that played out in an unthinkable way.
Another example of a little bit of lazy creation on Her Interactive's part is that the best man for the wedding, his name is Alan Payne, he definitely should have been a suspect in this game.
Yeah.
But they wrote him off as, oh, he just left to go look for Matt.
No, he left because he thinks the wedding is off. He thinks
Well, yeah, he went to go look for Matt, but he also thinks the wedding is off. And that's just lazy. They could have had him there in the castle as another character, which would have added a lot more that was needed to this game, and it would have worked great. Instead, they just wrote him off in one sentence.
He kind of reminds me of Hugh Penfold for the little bit that you get to talk to him over the phone, but for what that's worth. I think...
Can you... Okay, sorry, I'm just going off, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking of what ifs now. Imagine if Alan was in the castle, he was a suspect, and he had a feud against Kit because he was fully convinced Kit was behind this, and the two of them got in scuffles and everything.
That would be pretty cool. Kit could get another black eye. Which, by the way, we might as well say it now. Turns out, as you find out in endgame dialogue, Kit's black eye was an accident, just like how he'd been saying all the time. He and Matt were just messing around with gnomes in the garden, and he, walked into a branch or something. I forget what the exact reasoning is, but rest assured, he did not get punched in the face like how everyone suspects he did. Anyhow,
we've covered suspects.
One last thing I just want to say real quick about suspects is that as opposed to Ghost Dog's Moonlake, where there's just 3 characters and 3 character models, while there's technically just 3 suspects, or just 2 if you don't count Kyler, there are still 2 more characters that you meet in the end game. Probably when there's a little less than an hour left of the game, you'll run into them. And we'll get into them in the end game zone where we have a lot to talk about because the ending of this game is a very long sequence. But just rest assured, if you're feeling lonely in this game and you haven't beaten it yet, you'll find some more friends yet.
Okay, moving into the puzzles of this game. And right as I said that sentence, immediately jumped into my mind was the chemistry puzzle in the end game. That's just, when I think of hard Nancy Drew puzzles, that takes the cake.
Okay, so there are two main puzzles in this game, which I hate because it's not so much that they're super, super difficult. It's that every time you mess up, you have to die, and then do the whole good news, bad news sequence, which is funny the first 4 times, then it starts repeating scenarios, and then you have to try it again. The two puzzles are the chemistry, like Julian said, and crossing the bog for the first time to get into the bog hut from the old gypsy ladies that apparently used to live out there. Now that one sucks because I went into that thinking that it was about as long as, jumping across the slippery rocks in Danger on Deception Island. I would just have to figure out like 4 or 5 different things to get across. I was wrong. We cut about 25 minutes of me dying in the swamp and just getting so far using that weird codex thing with the cairns and the rocks to figure out what direction I was supposed to go in. We got so far and just kept on dying, and then we'd have to wait like a minute to try again and get back up to that point. So that puzzle should have been much shorter. It was plenty difficult. Make it shorter so it's more fun.
And then to touch on the chemistry puzzle, well, rest assured, we're going to get into the positives, because this game's got some great puzzles too, but I need to touch base on the chemistry puzzle. It's one of the final puzzles in the game that helps Nancy escape from the bunker, the rocket bunker that she's stuck in, and it is the definition of tedious, let me tell you. It's Nancy having to use this, like, claw machine type thing to grasp, like, certain types of chemicals at, like, a very precise level of grasping. I don't know what words I should use to describe this.
There's no way to describe it. It's a very, very visual puzzle. It's just very, very careful and meticulous.
It's like if you were playing with a claw machine, but everything was like a bomb that blows up if you grab it too hard.
Yeah.
That's like the best way I can describe it.
Horizontal claw machine.
Now, thank God that after you die, it saves all your progress. If it didn't, I would just quit the game.
If it didn't, we would not even be reviewing this game.
Yeah, no, I would quit the game if it didn't save that. So Her Interactive had to have known this was an abomination of a puzzle that they were making. But other than that, I mean, once you get past that, you feel like a huge weight gets lifted off your chest. Let's dive into some great puzzles now. My favorite one in this game, actually, is a very simple puzzle. It's the Otter Box. And at face value, it seems like a pretty easy puzzle. But don't be fooled. This little sucker will get you. It is a tough puzzle.
It's all about, 9 puzzle pieces. And they're all just rotatable squares. And they all have a picture of otters on them. And they're all separated at, like, the waist. Either can be otter feet or an otter head.
There's 4 different colors, too.
Yes, there's, blue, red, green, and purple. And the middle piece is nailed in, so essentially, you just need to get all of these other pieces to connect so that all otters run seamless from head to toe, same color continuity throughout all 9 squares. And it also has to deal with the borders. Oh my god, it's just so difficult. And it's so well made.
Like, you pick this puzzle up for the first time, there's no question about what the objective is. You know that you have to match all these otters and their borders seamlessly. But it is difficult, man. It is such a brutal puzzle. It took me a long time, but when I finally solved it, it was so satisfying. And then another puzzle that I love, it's the entire jetpack sequence, having to start up the jetpack.
Yeah, that's cool. I still don't understand binary, so the whole printing business about getting those instructions kind of sucks for me, but it's a simple enough puzzle in the process, so go ahead and touch on that if you want.
Well, I enjoyed the printing part. That's where the jetpack puzzle really starts. You need to run a piece of paper through a bunch of different inks and then dry it and all this stuff so that you're printing the directions for how to start up the jetpack. And, I've never seen a jetpack this complex in my life. Typically, jetpacks, it's like a pull a lever to start it or something, but
I've never seen a jetpack at all.
This thing, it's got dials, it's got levers, buttons, numbers, you have to input codes. It is the most complex jetpack you will ever see in your life, but it's a challenge to start up. I really liked it, actually.
Yeah, it's a fine puzzle, I guess. Getting to fly around in the jetpack is slightly ridiculous and does take away some of the realistic stuff. Just kind of moved away from Nancy Drew and more towards Scooby-Doo, but I'm okay with that.
What else do you want to touch on, like the sheep puzzle or something? Or?
The sheep is a cool puzzle. Again, it's really silly, because, it's not even like an Easter egg how you're giving some of these sheep purple mohawks. A lot of this game kind of just seems to lose itself in the silliness, and That's honestly a complaint that I have about it, because I like silliness when it's in Easter eggs and stuff that you're not supposed to see in the main playthrough of the game, but when you have, like, mandatory parts of the gameplay where you're giving sheep tie-dye pink mohawks, that's just kind of goofy. It kind of breaks the immersion. But anyhow...
Dollhouse.
Oh yeah, the dollhouse puzzles are kind of a staple to it. That's the puzzle that you come back to over and over again. They're logic puzzles where you have a bunch of different, like, corn husk dolls, and you're supposed to figure out where they go in this dollhouse by these instruction sheets you find around the place. You get small rewards for that as the game goes on, but eventually I think you get, like, the final plate for the jetpack printing process. Otherwise, as far as small puzzles go, the simple lamp puzzle, it's almost like a coffee table kind of puzzle. We've had one like it a long time ago, where you just move all the discs from so that no small disc can be under a big disc and get them all on the right side. That's a fun logic puzzle, and it's very rewarding to get that lantern and then be able to explore the entire moors. The runes puzzle was pretty difficult. I needed some help with that.
One of the final puzzles in the game is pretty difficult. It involves having to go back and find 5 particular books that are scattered throughout the library. And what you have to do is take letters from the titles of each book and use them to unlock a desk combination that's up in the top tower of the castle. It took a while for me to understand, but once I got the hang of it, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty well done puzzle.
Yeah, what's the one, like, Irizet Quiznax or something? It's like some weird gibberish word, and you have to follow these instructions to get your letter that you need from it. Anyhow, that all aside, what am I going to say? There's a lot of puzzles that are smaller, but kind of goofy, like I said, that are at the Screamin' Banshee Inn. First, there's the Mixology, which again is a little goofy for my taste, where it's a bar for just, like, old Irish folks to get together, but they, like, pretty much just serve soda and fruity non-alcoholic drinks, and I guess they were trying to be kid-friendly and stuff, but it's just kind of goofy, serving, like, root beer in a martini glass and stuff. Otherwise, you can play darts in there and get, like, a flute for that, or a tin whistle. You can play this game called Difference Detective, which was so incredibly hard because I have no patience at all, and I'm bad at timed puzzles, so I had to do that over and over again. And there's, like, the only time in the franchise, I think, where there's, like, a Guitar Hero puzzle. It's simple enough, but I'm bad at Guitar Hero, so you just have to, like...
It's like
play with... All you have to do is keep beat with the band. While you're their drummer while they play music for everybody, and they just play songs from the soundtrack. It's like a nice jig, and you just have to, like, press buttons on your arrow keys according to the colors as they slide into the circle. If you play Guitar Hero, you know how it goes.
So that pretty much covers almost every puzzle in this game. If you had to say, what's your favorite puzzle? Let's just get that out there.
Probably the Otterbox, because it's simple in concept, but I love it.
So, are you not a fan of puzzles in this game overall?
The two puzzles, the chemistry puzzle, which is just universally hated, and the bog crossing puzzle. Those are annoying. There was also, like, the wire puzzle in the missile silo at the end, where you need to, like, connect all the wires by colors.
Oh my gosh.
I cannot do that. I would need a spoiler because my eyes are very, very bad at following little details like that. It's like the sort of thing you'd see in a coloring book as a kid, or like an activity book.
Overall, how do you feel about puzzles in this game? Is it a weak point?
It's a meh game, I'd say. There's good puzzles, and then there are really, really bad puzzles. I'd say the really, really bad puzzles outshine the good ones.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Now, let's get into music for this game. The music it's really nice in my opinion.
The music's always nice.
But I have a critique for it, and that's that one central track, it's called Fiona, gets replayed in every other track. Like, Malloy is just a redub of Fiona with a little extra, like, flute in it.
A bit, yeah, I can see that.
And that's my critique for it, is Fiona is, like, the basis for all music in this game. It's a really nice track, but every other track seems a little too repetitive for me. Since I've already name-dropped Fiona, I think it's only fair that I play it now. It's a great track in and of itself, and
they just reuse it too much.
Yeah, that's its main critique. So here's Fiona. Another track that I love, this one is perfectly spooky, and this is a spooky game. Like, I don't think we've touched base on how actually creepy this game really is, and this track, Nursery, totally adds to that factor of it.
Personally, my favorite track on the game is probably Brendan, and I think it's just because it's such a tone shift from everything else. It's super casual. It really does just feel like I said before, this is a Scooby-Doo kind of Nancy Drew. It feels like the searching for clues Scooby-Doo kind of music. It's just so whimsical and kind of goofy, and it's the kind of goofy that I like to tolerate in a Nancy Drew game where it's not in your face, it's like thematically goofy. So just take a listen and just make your own judgment on it.
Another one that kind of fits the whole spooky vibe that accompanies Nursery is Grand. And I'm sure Grand refers to like the main grand room of the castle. I don't know. The castle itself in and of itself is just a spooky place more or less, so Grand is just another really fitting track to play when you're in the castle. So, out of the 4 tracks we played, being Brendan, Nursery, Fiona, and Grand, we'd love to hear which one of those is your favorite. And if you have another one that we didn't play that is your favorite, please go ahead and drop it down in the comments, because music for this game is a staple point. We love it.
Yeah, it is a decent game. I don't know, it's above decent. This is one of the better games for music, I think. I feel like the games where everything else is kind of lackluster usually have the best music. So, not to say that some parts of this are bad, but this is not my favorite game for puzzles or suspects.
So let's dive into atmosphere now.
Atmosphere in this game, yeah, I'd call it the best feature.
See, the game feels huge because this is the first game where you can actually like see Nancy from a third-person perspective,
like a bird's eye view.
Yeah, you actually walk around as Nancy from a bird's eye view for a lot of the game. You have to walk across the moor and everything, walk down to the Screaming Banshee and all this stuff. It makes the game feel huge, like much bigger than it really is.
I feel like this is what they should have done for Blackmore Manor. You should have been able to traverse the Blackmore estate. Nancy should have been able to like find boots that she would change in and out of so she didn't track mud everywhere and it'd be like a progression point in the game.
So did you like walking around like
Yes.
Nancy then?
Okay. I feel like around the borders and around objects it got kind of glitchy and you could get stuck on stuff, so that was a little bit annoying. But I feel like it was a really good navigation key.
And then you liked the jetpack then, I take it, right?
Yeah, the jetpack was nice too, I guess. Like I said, it's kind of goofy to give Nancy a jetpack.
Yeah, it was a little too goofy for me, but I understand how it was used to access the top tower and such.
Yeah, so like that one tower we mentioned earlier with the stairs blown out, eventually you get the jetpack because there's a spare one, because the Banshee uses one too, of course, and you can use it to get to the top tower.
And that's kind of like, I feel like the jetpack's purpose in the game was kind of to write off Fiona's like flying ability, kind of.
Yeah.
And it seems a little cheesy, but I get where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about the castle? Because the castle, it's a great part of the game. It does a great job of feeling like sinister, like a really dark part of history is taking place here. And that's why it's just so weird that you try to host a wedding here, but that's besides the point. What do you feel on the castle?
Okay, so the castle, I think that the castle's really cool for the bits of it you can see, which is not much. There's a hallway, Kyler's room, the nursery, and Kit's room, and that's it.
The nursery is my favorite place in the game. It has such a creepy feel.
Yeah, and the more that I think about the way you explore the castle, there's a little complaint that I want to bring back up in regards to puzzles. I'll be brief with this, but it's just something that made me really not like the puzzle in this game. And that's that most of the puzzles in the game, you can start and waste a lot of time on without having everything you need to beat them, and the game won't tell you this.
Right.
Like,
and that could be, you could write that off as her interactive speedrunning this game.
Yeah, I mean, especially the gear puzzle, because you can't tell if you have or would need more gears to complete that little circuit of gears thing. And I know that I've spent like probably upwards of an hour of my life working on it before figuring out that there are 3 more gears that I need to find. Sometimes you'll find the second gear and think, finally, now I have all the gears, and then waste even more time on it and realize you need a third one. It's ridiculous. Same goes for the scale balancing puzzle that's in Kyler's room, and I'm sure there's many more just like it, too.
Just having a simple line from Nancy, I don't think I have all the pieces yet.
Or
Like
just not being able to look at it.
Yeah, true, that too. But we're getting sidetracked on puzzles. Back to the castle, I think it's great. It's a fun place to explore. The nursery is so eerie. I mean, the track nursery is perfect for it. You walk in and you see a bunch of little kids' toys. There's like a little rocking horse that you can interactive rock back and forth.
Mind you, these are all nearly a century old kids' toys. Yeah.
Yeah, it's close to a century. There's a really old dollhouse with really creepy dolls. There's like a little kid's bed. There's cobwebs everywhere too. I mean, it just looks like the place hasn't been touched in, well, since 1944, really.
Very, very haunted vibes.
Yeah, and it's great for that. The nursery is the spookiest part in the game. Another cool part is the hut that we find later in the game. You want to touch on that?
Yeah, the bog hut, it's a huge pain to get there, but once you get to it, there's some cool stuff going on in the bog hut. Nancy just finds a whole bunch of things, like the jetpack, which is just like in a little laundry hamper or something. There is this little sewing stand with all these little husks and fabrics that have been used, and you can put 2 and 2 together and figure out that this is where all of the little dolls that you've been finding around the state have been coming from. Someone has been making them in here, and honestly, not knowing how this game ends, it must be pretty frightening to find this bog hut, because there's obviously someone in here who's been here recently, and we don't know if it's someone who we have or haven't met yet.
And then another part of the game, sadly you can't explore this place too much, but I think it was great in the limited time we spent there, was the tower.
The tower was cool.
The tower, it's interesting because it looks like someone is living up there. It's like not dusty, there's no cobwebs, the bed looks made and everything, which is kind of interesting, and it kind of adds like a little off-putting feel. Is it like, hey, is somebody actually living up here? It's a little unsettling.
Yeah.
But the tower's really cool. There's really only one main thing in there, and that's the desk. But once you have access to the desk, you find something, in my opinion, is one of the scariest parts of the game.
Yeah. You find, like, the 3rd or 4th doll that you find in the sequence of the game. You've been finding dolls just like it. They all have sewn, button, Coraline eyes. And Nancy takes a second to look at this one, and it's floral pattern button up in mom jeans. And she looks at it and goes, is this supposed to be me? And Julian, I don't think he knew that was coming, but I'd seen that before, and it freaked him out.
Oh, that had me shook. I was like, hold up, what's going on here? I don't know, that was just concerning to find that doll. And then we also find a little picture of Fiona, right?
Yeah, there is a little picture of Fiona. This is right before the end game challenge and sequence begins.
So wait, I'm just putting this together. This would have been Brendan Malloy's bedroom.
Probably, yeah.
That was probably it.
And it's a really, honestly, decent sequence of events leading up to figuring out that Fiona is the Banshee and that she survived the explosion way back in the 1940s and has been living here ever since. And it's that, what do you call it? You find, like, Brendan's diary in the roll-top desk once you get it open, pictures of Fiona. And I know that a lot of people don't take the time to read all these little documents in Nancy Drew games, especially when they're in cursive, if you're as bad at reading cursive as we are. But in this diary, it talks about how Brendan made a jetpack for Fiona, and then he'd see her whizzing by the windows every now and again. Parent of the year.
Wasn't she 5?
Yeah, something like that.
A 5-year-old on a jetpack, let's go.
Yeah, but anyhow, That's like the biggest clue probably. So Nancy will then find this old key in the desk, and she picks it up and she takes it all the way back to the bar with her, which is the only place where we know that there is a box that's locked that we haven't been able to open yet. And this is one of the scariest sequences in the Nancy Drew case. What I think is the most terrifying thing about the sequence, it's just so unsettling, is you have this giant long trip across the moors and the bog to think about what's going to be in this box. I've made it this far in the game. It's going to be something really sinister probably. It'll be the culprit revealing clue. And you turn in the key and you turn the lock and the box opens up and it's a birthday card that says Happy 6th Birthday. And Nancy opens it up and takes a read, and it's addressed to a little girl named Fiona. And Nancy turns around and sure enough a cinematic begins. There is the Banshee standing in the shack right behind her.
Oh my gosh. Listen, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be in here. This is your home, isn't it? My name's Nancy Drew, and you're Fiona, right? Fiona Malloy? Fiona, listen, I didn't mean any harm. See, I'm looking for someone, a young man named Matt. I don't suppose you've seen him. Fiona?
What I think is really unique about this part of the game is that this is the most fear I've heard in Nancy's voice.
Yeah.
Lonnie Manella did a really good job of voice acting this part, because Nancy, from her perspective, she's breaking into this person's house and she's going through her stuff and everything. She probably feels like she's in some hot water, let alone standing in front of what seems to be a ghost.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really scary time in the game. I certainly didn't remember this encounter at all, so when I replayed the game, man, I was shook. Just like when I found the doll of Nancy, I had no clue what was going on, and it surprised me.
Dad was just petrified.
Yeah, he kind of was. It was pretty funny.
One thing that I think is just a nice touch in this is that you notice all the time in other Nancy Drew games when Nancy gets caught, like snooping from Shorty and stuff like that, she just kind of brushes it off and goes, oops, sorry, Shorty, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean for you to catch me. I'm sorry I got caught. But when this happens, Nancy just feels genuinely bad for this woman, Fiona. And she sounds so sympathetic. She's like, oh my gosh, your name is Fiona Malloy, right? I'm sorry. I know that this is your home. I didn't mean to trespass. And she just tries to give her name. Anyways, Fiona pushes Nancy to a corner of the room. And Nancy just guides her there. She pulls a lever, and Nancy falls down a trapdoor. And then this is the perfect way to get into the ending sequence of the game. So Nancy comes to, she's in this dark corridor, and just by player instinct, you click on the only thing you can see, this weird button on the wall, and as soon as you do, you just hear, wait, don't touch that! And then this great big metal sliding door comes out of the ceiling behind you, just in time for you to see Matt just like 4 feet away from you, and the door falls between you, and there's the glass window for you to talk to him. And then the place starts to light up, and you're in some sort of weird secret underground laboratory, and Matt has obviously been stuck here.
This was a great introduction to Matt's character, and
Yeah.
I really liked the laboratory itself. It's a really small part of the setting, but it's just unique, because you don't spend much time there, really. It's home to some of the worst puzzles in the game, but I mean, it's fun, and I loved the conversation with Matt. It can go on for a long time. You can talk to this dude about everything.
You know, I'm gonna be honest, the laboratory is my favorite place in the game. I think that
Why is that?
I feel like it's just a really exciting place to be, and it's not over too soon. I mean, the chemistry puzzle is super annoying, but at least there's no mistake about the instructions. So you get to really take your time in there, and it's a tedious puzzle, and it takes forever because you keep on dying, but it's somewhere to be. It's a nice, cool change of scenery.
So Nancy and Matt are clearly stuck down here for dead. There's no way of getting out, no food or water or anything. And Nancy realizes the only way that, they can get out of here with their lives is if they launch the rocket. And that's a little unsensical. I feel like they would die or something. They're way too close to the blast radius, but I mean,
Yeah.
at the same time, that's their only option, so I get it, I guess. Through a couple of terrible puzzles mentioned before, we end up blasting the rocket up from out of the ground. It comes up, and then we get a cool cutscene of every character looking in awe as a rocket from God knows where is shooting up from the sky.
Real quick, I want to talk about meeting Matt more, though, because Matt is such a delight to talk to. He's a really well-written character as far as his dialogue goes. I honestly might call him my favorite character in the game, even though he doesn't count as a suspect. And there are, like, a lot of dialogue trees you can go through with him. He does sound like the same practical Joker goober that everyone says he is. He reminds me of some of my British friends. You can talk to him about how Kit got that black eye and how they would tease Denal together. And you could just make fun of Denal with him for the most part. It's the funniest thing. But overall, it's nice to be able to just refer back to him every now and again and talk to him about what you're trying to do down there. The puzzles in the missile silo are just kind of annoying in some parts, especially the wire. Honestly, I will take the chemical spill puzzle over the scrambled wire puzzle any day. Oh. I have really bad eyes. It would be better for me to do the chemical spill one.
That's an interesting take. But, the ending happens with a cool cutscene of every character looking up at the sky in complete awe to a rocket from God knows where blasting off into the sky. And I think we see Denal and Kyler together. They're like, what?
Yeah, Denal's like asleep and it wakes him up. You see Kit and Kyler together.
Right, yeah, sorry. It was a pretty funny way to conclude the game, but at the same time, as mentioned before, there's just a couple of nonsensical parts of this game, and the ending being one of them.
No, hold up, hang on. So, anyways, there's this cute sequence where Kyler comes to the edge of the missile silo, which really shouldn't be there. That's probably radioactive or something, and she starts shouting down at Matt and Nancy, and she says that she loves Matt, and the wedding goes on, and Nancy covers how many times they said I love you to each other in immense detail in the endgame letter. But to me, there's the ending's good. The end game letter is where you see that they were just trying to get this game out the door, because it has some of the most egregious Photoshop and rushed graphics that I've ever seen in a Nancy Drew game.
True.
Two of which just haunt my memory. So the first is just Kit looking all sad at the wedding reception because, like, you know, the Chad Matt took Kyler and Kit wasn't lucky and his whole plan to get back with Kyler didn't work. And then he meets some young Irish maiden who's catering the reception, and it just photoshops this real woman into the scene, terribly juxtaposed with Kit's already mass CGI. But by far, the worst shot, like my dad was like, oh my goodness, was when it shows Fiona Malloy with a haircut at a retirement home. Like, her face is superimposed, her CGI face is superimposed onto a real old person, and she does not look very happy. Maybe she's confused. As far as her character resolution goes, Denal agrees that he wants to get help for her, and that she was taken in by gypsy women who lived in that hut in the bog when the castle exploded, and she'd been raised there her whole life, and it did not do wonders for the mental health of a young girl. But on that note, so Fiona, it honestly feels like she doesn't have the happiest ending. She just goes to a nursing home and I guess gets cared for, so I guess that's all she can ask for. But.
So in conclusion, the ending of this game is nonsensical, but I loved the idea of Fiona being alive for the most part. But I loved the idea of Fiona being alive and being the banshee who kind of haunts Castle Malloy. This game, it would have been a much worse game if the culprit was somebody pulling a banshee hoax. That would have been way worse.
That would have been too Scooby-Doo for my taste.
Yeah, that would have been something else. So I think we should get into ranking this game now.
Yeah, so...
Jamie, you should take this game first. What's opinions on this game?
Okay, so...
Break down the tier system.
Story and premise. Okay, so yeah, we gotta break down how we always rank our games. So we like to rank Nancy Drew games without numbers 1 through 10 because some Nancy Drew games are better on paper than they are in practice. So we like to give a grading scale, A through F, A being good, F being the worst, and then S tier is reserved for the best of the best as far as our games go. We've only handed out a couple of those so far, and this game is not an S tier, of course, and I don't think it's an A tier either, because like I said, the puzzles are structured in a really poor way where you can start some puzzles even if you don't have everything you need to finish them, so that ends up having the player waste a lot of their time. Sometimes the task list will even say, figure out what to do with those gears, and you can't do it. The suspects, I mean, it's cool that they brought in a bonus 2 characters in the final act of the game, Matt and Fiona, But before then, it really just feels like there are two suspects in this game, even though it is nice to have Kyler to talk to and just kind of confide in. There's a handful of puzzles that I'd say were enjoyable. They are, again, easily outshined by the bad puzzles. The music is great, the atmosphere is great, the ending is good. I love the whole Fiona encounter. It's spooky, but this game suffers from a problem of being way, way too silly for most people's taste. I just want to say, for some reason, our dad really, really liked this game. He said that this might have been his favorite game that he's played through yet, and that it had the coolest atmosphere. I don't know if he would have agreed if he was the one who had to do the puzzles the whole time.
Well, that goes back to my theories that everyone's least favorite Nancy Drew is somebody's favorite.
Yeah, I guess so.
I know we're deeply offending someone right now.
Yeah.
So.
But I'm gonna have to give this game a low B, almost a C. I think that it stopped being a C just because of how pretty the music is. Just because of that whimsical Scooby-Doo Brandon track. That is the saving grace stopping me from handing out a C right now.
So when I played this game, the thing that stuck out to me the most was that it was just rushed. And I don't think Her Interactive really put all of their will and effort into this game, which is kind of disappointing. To give a brief breakdown of everything, story and premise is good, has some really silly loopholes though that, I don't know, it just kind of felt out of place. The suspects, I love Kyler. I talked about how her animation is great, she looks beautiful and everything. But there's literally like two suspects, which is another disappointing. It's a letdown. Puzzles, Jamie said it perfect. There's some good ones, but the bad ones easily outshine them. Music, it's good, but it's a lot of reusing the Fiona track for other tracks, and everything feels very similar. Atmosphere is great, the game feels much bigger than it actually is, which is a plus, and the ending a little more nonsensical. All in all, I'm going to be giving this game a C. I think it's a C because it just is a little too rushed for my liking, and a lot of missed opportunities.
Yeah, I guess it is fair to say that Phantom of Venice is a much more polished game than this one, and seeing that they both came out in like a 3-month span of each other, I'm willing to guess that the most of the production budget went to Phantom of Venice. So, on that note, thanks for tuning in to the Nancy Drew Reviews series again. Castle Malloy was a fun game to play, and an even more fun one to review. We recently did upload the no commentary nostalgic footage of this game, if you'd like to listen to it going to bed. It's always a good thing to listen to just hear the little calls of sheep and the music and the moors and all that. Otherwise, stay tuned for our next review, Nancy Drew Ransom of the Seven Ships. I'm sure Julian's gonna have a fun time tearing that one apart while I desperately try to defend what I can. Anyhow, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Vote for Holt.
Vote for Holt, everybody. Thanks for listening.